Tony D and Little Joan in the background. I can't do Piney podcast tonight. It's too late, and I'm completely fried. Um, so instead, I would like to talk about this article. It's a short article, but very relevant to some of the discussions we've been having online. It's from the American Spectator. It's called The War on White Male Fiction Writers. How likely is it that having produced the best literature in many centuries, in 2014, white male writers suddenly lost their ability to scrawl? And what it basically outlines is another article called The Vanishing White Male Writer, in which Jacob Savage describes the Cold War against male Caucasian fiction writers waged by the left dominated publishing industry since, no surprise, the Obama years. Savage starts his place with irrefutable starts his piece with irrefutable proof of this outrage, citing the Golden Fleece for Young Novelists, the New York Times notable fiction list. And he goes on to show that white male writers have been basically cut out of all the New York uh, areas where young novelists are have prominently featured. Um, Now, I'm of several minds of this, but the first, one of the things he does touch upon is how women completely dominate the landscape in publishing, which is something I've been telling you for a while now. And again, it's not that I don't want to see women publish books for women. It's a perfectly valid market. It's a good market. You can make a lot of money. And if you're a publishing house, you certainly want to not ignore that market. But there's a 40% of the market that you are ignoring, and that's male uh, audience. And I come at it from the audience perspective. I don't come at it from the white guys are getting cut out perspective, although I think they are. I think they're top of the list of the guys you banned. I think men in general are being sort of cut out of the literature for anybody who's more oppressed, let's say, and anybody who toes the line of whatever the current ideological trend is. And right now it's, oh, Trump is an evil man and he's the terrible person. He's orange bad guy from Germany. And then, of course, Elon is the new narrative. So anybody who likes him, well, you might as well just pack your bags. So, it doesn't really provide any solutions to the thing, but I do have some positive points on this. And this also, they don't mention it, but it's funny that this article came out the same week that John A. Douglas did that video in Walmart where he goes to the shelf of the book section and he tries to find a male fantasy book, and it's just all women. Just all women, romancy stuff. And it's women, 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 which I've been telling you about for a while. And again, not a problem with you publishing them, but that shelf should be about 60% books for women, maybe 70, because women tend to do the shopping. Sorry, ladies. And about 30% of that should be for men. And the women who come into the stores, they'll buy stuff for their men. I've had plenty of women buy my books for their men, but it's very hard to get them to read now because it's not that men stopped reading. They would look at books, but they came away with a bad taste in their mouth, I think, because a lot of times the books would just be feminized, or it wouldn't speak to them as men. Look, there are just certain things women will never understand about men. So, for instance, tonight on the stream, we started talking about various YouTube streamers that cover historical pieces of history. And I was very excited because the guys were citing, oh, this guy just covers, the Air Force in the USSR and how they had lots of military mishaps and how the pilots in this one particular type of airplane would get drunk on alcohol from the air conditioning unit in the plane, and I just thought, oh, that sounds awesome. I mean, it just sounded like an awesome video to me. And I realized that I'm turning into a middle-aged boomer that loves to hear about military stuff. But it's true. A lot of times I try to sell the Pineys to men at events. I try to call them over and talk about the books. And a lot of them will come back. Well, I only read nonfiction, or I read military history and stuff like that. So it's very hard to entice them to read something that's not that, because I feel like they feel that they will be disappointed, that they're not going to hear their perspective, that they're going to be lectured at about some issue, whatever the hell it is, from a women's point of view. And again, I'm not saying you can't have your point of view. I'm not saying you can't have your books, but men should have their books too. And their books should be, again, more action-oriented, more dialogue-driven, more about what is built and conquered and created rather than relationships. Men are not nearly obsessed with relationships as women. Women love to talk about their feelings. They love to talk about relationships and who loves who and why they do that and the why. Men don't like to talk about that. They don't like to talk about why. They like to know the how. Like, how did you build this? How did you become emperor of this island? They want to know about accomplishments. They want to know new. And, a lot of times I spin a lot of history into my books. I think that's fascinating. And I think men would find that fascinating too. To me, it's very interesting reading about the Revolutionary War, because the Loyalists were actually very popular amongst most people during the colonial America, because most people weren't necessarily for the revolution. They just kind of wanted to get by in life, and they figured, well, this revolution thing's happening, but I'm not involved. I just want to farm my land, and whoever's king, I'll just pay my taxes to them. And that was kind of their attitude. And that to me is an interesting part of history that a lot of people don't know, and I feel like that's a cool thing to tell people. And I feel like a lot of men would read that and go, huh, that's interesting, and then possibly go back and read more books on the subject to get it in more greater detail. But they kind of can't, because they look at the books and they look at the covers and the titles and the synopsis, and they just go, I don't want to read about this. I don't want to read about some elf falling in love with a wizard. That's not for them. They want to read, now if you have a story about a elf that conquers a planet, that might be of interest to fantasy readers who are male. But here's the good news. All these New York book awards, I'm sure they're fine in their circle of frou-frou snobbery that these people live in and day out. But I feel like they're a bunch of nonsense, honestly. That winning some awards can up your sales if you're in the right market, and if you're in the world of, say, big time publishers. Yeah, those awards are going to help you and your career, but who gets them? Well, every award ceremony I've ever known, and I know the comic book ones very well, I have nothing but disdain for the process, because there's not much of a process there. There's a lot of bias, there's a lot of nepotism, and I assume there's a lot of bribery going on too, especially when there's big money involved. And I don't trust for a second that all the awards that they mention are even fairly tabulated in any way, shape, or form. They're just picking people they want to sell They have the right agent, the right connections, the right publisher, and these are the people they want to sell, and they're going to sell them. They're marketable, they're young, and whatever. So I don't think we need that anymore. We have the internet, we have the Amazon system, and other systems to get your work out there. And if you have good social media, hey, you look at the Ripperverse and the money they raise. Some of the authors who have raised tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars online with Kickstarters, you can't really beat it. You really can't. Um, so, you know, as much as I think it's unfair that men have been cut out of all these various awards and lists and notable things, I think they're mostly irrelevant now. You know, the magazines that once ruled the roost in literature, people don't read them. I mean, and even when people read them, who read them? A magazine like the New Yorker was for someone who was relatively sophisticated, usually on the East Coast, usually in New York, who was interested in literature and things like that, and other things that the New Yorker would cover. These days, you find stuff on the internet here and there, whatever you want to find, and you don't have to be beholden to a magazine that'll cover this and that and give you a curated list of things. You can go on the internet and pick and choose whatever the hell you want. You can be a total dilettante and pick this and that and just go through the buffet at will and read article after article, including stuff from the New Yorker if you know where to look. And, you don't have to worry about some stupid magazine curating it for you. And who are they? Well, they used to rule the roost back when paper was a thing, but now they're done. Now it's more democratic, I think, these Kickstarters and these internet sensations. And each year they roll bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, my channels grow, and my social media presence grows, and my events grow. So that's all you have to do. You just have to work at your audience and, keep cranking out books. And you don't have to worry about these awards. I mean, yeah, they might get you some sales back in the day. I think they're more for people who used to own bookstores, but those are few and far between too. So you gotta understand, like back in the day, book buyers and book sellers would read these publications that, oh, so and so won this award, you ought to get 5 copies for your store. Now, is that even relevant? So some book wins an award in New York. Are you going to buy it for your store in New Jersey? Why? Who even knows about it? Who even knows about these awards unless they're a total bibliophile and just reading everything about books as they're reading books? Yeah, some people do that. I mean, there's a I'm pretty obsessed with movies. There are people who are just as obsessed with books and publishing and everything that goes on there. That's not a big group of people. There's millions of people in this country who don't read nearly enough. And there are books out there for them. There really are. I tried to read books when I was younger sometimes, and I would get frustrated, and I forced myself to read a lot of classics. But after a while, I got bored with reading the classics, and I wanted to read books for me. And it took me a long time, but I eventually did find stuff that really spoke to me. Those stories I really liked. With a lot of it was comic books, but I found authors that I liked, and I read them. And I found, for books, I found Hunter S. Thompson and Kurt Vonnegut, and their voices really spoke to me, and I liked the way they write, and it was fun and interesting. And I think anyone can find those kinds of authors that will speak to them. But they have to be aware of them. And the problem with these awards and these sort of pretentious cliques of writers and publishers and whatnot is, number one, They're not very honest about who's good and who's not. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart to promote literature. They're doing it for money, in my opinion. They're doing it to promote certain authors at certain times to market books in a certain way. So, for that, to me, they're worthless because they're just going to push those books just to make money. Now, some of those books might be relevant, and 200 years from now, somebody might be reading one of them, but it's more likely they'll come and go because that's what happens to most art. It just comes and goes. It's popular at the time, and that's really the problem. There should be awards and notable lists that really delve into truth and what's actual literature. And do those exist? Well, they might. For some fleeting moment, you might get a guy who's super honest and writes one of these articles, and maybe the editor lets it pass through, but I find that very, very doubtful. So I think only great literature stands the test of time. So if my books are being read 100 years from now, then I did a good thing, right? Then my books are valid and good, and everybody should be reading them because, hey, they read them 100 years ago. There must be something to them. And they're reading them for a century. Must be something. Must be something about them. And that's, sometimes when you read the classics, you realize, oh, wow, I can see why they read these. This was new. This was interesting. This is the first time they use these kinds of phrases or these kinds of, literary devices in order to entice people. And so you can see, for instance, why everybody reads Shakespeare. You can see, some of the phrases and sayings that became, popular in its day. And you could see that it's really sort of, its own style, and it's very classic and interesting. The left-dominated, women-dominated publishing, book publishing today isn't about literature. It's about people showing how virtuous they are. Most of them women. Some men, but most of them women, because they're more caught up in their own image. And this is why I found it so frustrating to work with publishing houses sometimes, because I found that the women were just like that. They were more concerned about themselves and their image than doing any work or promoting any of the books. And it's very frustrating. But, I'm sure that's not all true, but it was true in a couple of places I worked. And, it's kind of sad. But, again, the good news is you can just do this yourself. If you really want to do this, and we should do this ourselves, eventually someone's going to come along and see that you're making money, that you're selling books, and they're going to say, we want to be in business with you. We want to help this. And I've gotten that a lot from my various adventures. I've had people just come up and thank me for writing stuff about the pines and the Pineys and South Jersey, and that includes not just men but women too. And I found my niche, and it's very satisfying, and it's something that can grow, and I feel that it's very real. So that's the kind of people I think need promotion and awards and lists and whatever. But unfortunately, I think it's all about the money. So just keep plugging away and ignore the noise, and don't get caught up in the war, because I think that just like the mainstream media is just falling to pieces, most of these book publishers are falling to pieces anyway. Look at the state of bookstores if you need any more proof. Anyhow, that's it for me, Tony D and Little Joan. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to check out the Pineys, books 1 through 17, on Amazon. And don't forget to check out the Piney podcast tomorrow when I'm more awake to do it. I'll see you on the Alien Agenda podcast at 2 p.m. tomorrow.